which smelt of grilled fish. I could hear a child crying. They undid my blindfold, and I found myself in a cold, unfurnished room. Then 3 madmen laid into me and beat me to a pulp, until the darkness again descended. In fact, I don't really know exactly what details of my story matter to you for me to get right of asylum in your country. I find it very hard to describe those days of terror. The wooden door of the room opened, and a young man, tall, with a pale and haggard face, came in carrying breakfast. At first I was uncertain what I could say or do. But then I threw myself at his feet and implored him tearfully, "I'm the father of 3 children. I'm a religious man who fears God. I have nothing to do with politics or religious denominations. God protect you. I'm just an ambulance driver, before the invasion and since the invasion. I swear by God and his noble prophet." The young man put a finger to his lips and rushed out. I felt that my end had come. At the second prostration, I felt that a layer of ice was forming across my body, and I almost cried out in fear. But the young man opened the door, carrying a small lighting device attached to a stand, and accompanied by a boy carrying a Kalashnikov rifle. The boy stood next to me, pointing the gun at my head, and from then on, he did not leave his place. A fat man in his 40s came in, taking no notice of me. On the wall he hung a black cloth banner inscribed with a Quranic verse urging Muslims to fight jihad. Then a masked man came in with a video camera and a small computer. Then a boy came in with a small wooden table. The masked man joked with the boy, tweaked his nose and thanked him, then put the computer on the table and busied himself with setting up the camera in front of the black banner. The thin young man tried out the lighting system 3 times and then left. The young man came back carrying the sack of heads, which they had taken from the ambulance. Everyone blocked their noses because of the stink from the sack. The fat man asked me to sit in front of the black banner. Another man came in, thick-set, with one eye. This man had in his hand an army uniform. The man with one eye sat close to me with his arm across my shoulders like a friend and asked me to calm down. He told me they wouldn't slaughter me if I was cooperative and kind-hearted. I didn't really understand fully what he meant with this kind-hearted. He told me it would only take a few minutes. The one-eyed man took a small piece of paper from his pocket and asked me to read it. Meanwhile, the fat man was taking the decomposing heads out of the sack and lining them up in front of me. It said on the piece of paper that I was an officer in the Iraqi army, and these were the heads of other officers, and that accompanied by my fellow officers, I had raided houses, raped women, and tortured innocent civilians. That we had received orders to kill from a senior officer in the US Army in return for large financial rewards. The man with one eye asked me to put on the army uniform, and the cameraman asked everyone to pull back behind the camera. The cameraman's voice was very familiar. Perhaps it resembled the voice of a famous actor, or it might have been like the voice of the professor when he was making an exaggerated effort to talk softly. The videotape was such a success so quickly that everyone was surprised. Al Jazeera broadcast the videotape. They allowed me to watch television, and on that day they were jumping for joy, so much that the fat man kissed me on the head and said I was a great actor. After the success of the broadcast, they started treating me in a manner which was better than good. Their kindness culminated on that night they sold me to the second group. Then 3 masked men from that group came into the room, and after the man with one eye had given me a warm farewell, the new men laid into me with their fists, tied me up and gagged me, then shoved me into the boot of a car which drove off at terrifying speed. The second group's car traveled far this time. Perhaps we reached the outskirts of Baghdad. They took me out in a desolate village where dogs roamed and barked all over the place. They held me in a cattle pen, and there were 2 men who took turns guarding the pen night and day. I don't know why, but they proceeded to starve me and humiliate me. They were completely different from the first group. They wore their masks all the time and never spoke a word with me. They would communicate with each other through gestures. The hours passed with oppressive tedium. I would hope that anything would happen rather than this life sentence with 3 cows. I gave up thinking about these people or what religious group or party they belonged to. It no longer occurred to me to try to escape or to ask them what they wanted from me. I felt that I was carrying out some mission, a binding duty which I had to perform until my last breath. Perhaps there was a secret power working in league with the human power to play a secret game for purposes too grand for a simple man like me to grasp. What I'm saying has nothing to do with my asylum request. What matters to you is the horror. In the end, they came into the cow pen after midnight one night. One of the masked men spread one corner of the pen with fine carpets. Then his companion hung a black banner inscribed, "The Islamic Jihad Group, Iraq Branch." Then the cameraman came in with his camera, and it struck me that he was the same cameraman as the one from the first group. They gave me a piece of paper and told me to read out what was written on it. That I belonged to the Mehdi army, and I was a famous killer. I had cut off the heads of hundreds of Sunni men, and I had support from Iran. Before I'd finished reading, one of the cows gave a loud moo. So the cameraman asked me to read it again. I later realized that everyone who bought me was moving me across the same bridge. I don't know why. One group would take me across the Martyr Bridge towards Kark on the west bank of the Tigris. Then the next group would take me back across the same bridge to Rasafa on the east bank. If I go on like this, I think my story will never end. And I'm worried you'll say what others have said about my story. So I think it would be best if I summarize the story for you, rather than have you accuse me of making it up. They sold me to a third group. The car drove at speed across the Martyr Bridge once again. My fear evaporated, and I began to grasp the concept of this secret mission for which they had chosen me. Throughout the year and a half of my kidnapping experience, I was moved from one hiding place to another. They shot video of me talking about how I was a treacherous Kurd, an infidel Christian, a Saudi terrorist, a Syrian Baathist intelligence agent, or a revolutionary guard from Zoroastrian Iran. On these videotapes, I murdered, raped, started fires, planted bombs, and carried out crimes that no sane person would even imagine. All these tapes were broadcasted on satellite channels around the world. Experts, journalists, and politicians sat there discussing what I said and did.